When I was a submarine officer, we spent a lot of time trying to train on these very technical systems that are involved in operating the reactor. One of them is called the protection and analysis system. It's how the reactor protects itself from either humans doing stupid things or the environment doing harmful things to it. And one way you can teach that system is to have a trainee just sort of memorize all this stuff. Another way to teach it is you challenge them to beat it. So see if you can.
Not an actual real life.
No, so not have them do it, but give them the challenge. How would you beat that system? If our goal were to do
how would you blow up the nuclear?
To be very clear to all of your audience, nobody out there is trying to blow up our reactors. But boy, you challenge a young, sharp
Think
kid,
about how it might happen.
How would you break it? Because what they have to do is they actually have to know the system. It's just like in warfighting. The way you beat your enemy is you understand how he operates.
100%. So, well, the way you do cyber defense is you play a game to try to break in.
It's a game. And so the break-in game, I had more learning happen about how P&A worked than ever just droning through, oh, here's this interlock, here's the system, whatever. Challenge them to beat it, and they'll learn.
CEO and co-founder. Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale.
Why is STEM important? Well, STEM's actually critical. Science, technology, engineering, and math. This is the foundation that's behind the innovation world. And frankly, the innovation world is going to be where a lot of the most important leaders come from in the next generation. And how do we teach innovation? How do we teach STEM for the 21st century? What does a leader of our society need to know about STEM? What's the leader who's going to build in the innovation world need to know? How do you take from the best of the academic world and from the key lessons from the innovation world to solve real problems, to actually build things in the world that are going to drive the future? Dr. David Ruth, our new Dean of STEM at University of Austin, is here today to discuss with us. Dr. David Ruth worked on attack submarines, aircraft carriers, was a war planner in Asia. He taught some of our best and brightest minds in the Navy. Now he's helping craft the curriculum to teach some of the best and brightest minds in our country. Let's hear from David what it would be like to be one of these founding students in our STEM program. I'm Joe Lonsdale. Welcome to American Optimist. Dr. David Ruth, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for having me, Joe.
Dave, you are the Dean of the Center for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or STEM, at the University of Austin, the new university we're building. And before that, you concluded a 31-year career in the Navy.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you for your service. So you grew up in a military family. Your dad was Vietnam era Navy pilot. What motivated you to serve?
Yeah, so my dad loved what he did. He came home from work every day saying, I can't believe they pay me to do this. So it made me attracted to that kind of work. And my mom and dad inculcated in me this sense of service. And I lived, I was in high school in the Cold War. I was living overseas, and I just had the sense that serving was the right thing to do. And it was a great way to follow after my dad's footsteps.
Well, why'd you decide it was time to join UATX?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a great gig at my last gig at the Naval Academy, and would have been great to stay there, but I had this opportunity to do a new thing. And my opportunity to look for new stuff arose at exactly the same time as UATX was launching, and it was just too great an opportunity not to throw my hat in the ring. And then here I am.
Another way to fight for our country with our values.
That's right.
Tell us about your early naval career. You worked on an attack submarine, right? An aircraft carrier. You were a war planner in Asia. Tell us about this a little bit.
Yeah, so it's kind of amazing to have already sort of had that chapter of life. So I started as a nuclear engineer and submarine warfare officer. And what can I say about that? Well, it's the silent service, so we don't really talk much about what we do. But I get to work with amazing sailors, and I got to go to places that I can't even talk about. But it really felt like we were directly contributing to national security issues by serving in all corners of the globe underwater.
How long would you spend underwater at a time?
So my longest time underwater is only 6 weeks. So
still a long time to be underwater.
Yeah. So
is it kind of cramped in there?
So you're so busy, I don't think you even notice. I would way rather be on a submarine than in office space with cubicles. But yeah, you get used to it. The food's good, the people are great, and it's important work.
Are there people who get claustrophobic?
Those people don't join.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't join. Sorry. I love to serve in different ways.
Those people don't join.
It's like a tight space down there.
Yeah, it is.
What were some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, so working with amazing sailors, most of these sailors I worked with on a submarine, they could easily have gone to college and done something that wasn't turning wrenches on a submarine, but whatever their family background was, they signed up to serve. The Navy recognized how smart they were, and they made them nuclear engineers and sonar techs and things like that. So got to serve with great people and go to amazing places.
So you do the submarine for a while, and you're doing something secret, then you pop up at a port and get to go visit another country?
That's exactly what it is. Secret and then liberty, and the more secret than liberty. Yeah, so seeing a ton of the world. My first visit to Israel was actually on a submarine.
Oh, wow.
A quick sea story about that. We were pulling into Israel. We'd been at sea for 5 months, not underwater for 5 months, but away from home for 5 months, and we're pulling into Haifa. We're a month from coming home, and the port of Haifa, they're on strike. The front gate, like there's a stack of tires and they're on fire, and there's no power to the base. And so normally what you do is you pull in a port, and the first thing you do is you plug your ship in so you don't have to run the reactor anymore. They called us and said, can you provide us power? So like our first day in the port was here's a pitch for nuclear energy.
Why their power broke?
So they had a power outage. They had a strike, and I think there was some, I don't know exactly why their power was out, but they needed it from us. So our first 24 hours in Haifa was as a portable nuclear power plant for the Port of Haifa. It's pretty exciting.
So I have to ask, because I read all these old books, and there's always metaphors about being like a drunken sailor and being crazy. Like, were some of the guys big partiers when you finally came into port? Is that still a thing?
So it's less a thing now. When I had about 5 or 10 years in, there was this effort to deglamorize alcohol, which I think is well intentioned for sure. But just imagine you put 130 guys in a metal tube 6 weeks at a time, and then you spring them loose in a Liberty port where all the closest shops offer alcohol and other things. It's just going to.
So there's still parties going on. It's just the nature of the business.
It's the nature of the business. I think that I think we're doing it in a safer way. In some ways, the more safety you put in, it kills some good fun, but it also gets rid of some trouble. So it's a trade-off.
It's good to know that traditions that are hundreds of years old haven't entirely changed.
They haven't. I have on my office wall, I have my shellback certificate, which is when I cross the equator on an aircraft carrier, and that involves I don't want to call it hazing, but some sort of friendly fraternal activity. And so I have that proudly on my wall.
It's called a shellback certificate.
Shellback certificate. Everybody that's crossed the equator in the Navy gets one after they survive the fraternal
the challenges. That's
yeah.
funny. And so after all of this, you taught for 13 years as a military professor of mathematics at the U.S. Naval Academy, like 2009 to 22. Can you share a bit about your academic career and the classes you taught?
Yeah, sure. So I had the great privilege to teach at my alma mater for 13 years. I was a professor of mathematics, but I taught mostly upper level probability statistics, optimization courses, some machine learning, current things that students will be able to go put to work out in the fleet, and so and then did research in those areas as well.
I want to ask, your scholarship expertise is in non-parametric statistics with multivariate change detection. I have to cheat. Change detection applications. It's non-parametric statistics with multivariate change detection applications. What does that mean?
Yeah, in short, so if you think of statistics as using data to understand systems that involve uncertainty, a lot of the ways that people approach that is that they assume that the uncertainty is following a certain model. And in 1 or 2 dimensions, that assumption is not bad. Once you get into really high dimensional spaces, you think about monitoring a machine. Say a flying helicopter has got 20,000 different things you're measuring, and you want to know, is something going wrong?
So there's no simple models you could put on.
Yeah, there are no simple models. And so if you strip away distributional assumptions, the math gets much harder. That I found challenging and interesting. So non-parametric statistics goes after those tough problems.
So it's like super chaotic problems for things to go wrong in all sorts of random ways.
Yeah, right. I mean, my interest was making sure that pilots that are flying helicopters learn that something's going wrong before they're flying the plane. That was really what drove me to that.
There still must be certain like vectors or certain things you could break down into as a common ways things go wrong, right? Even if there's lots of those variables.
Yeah. So specifically that on the reliability side, you're right. You can find modes of failure and things like that. The part where my research focuses is on when you're looking at time varying measurements in say 20,000 directions. Sometimes things will subtly change where everything's changing a little bit. No one is changing enough to give you the high temperature alarm or the low oil pressure alarm.
But if you look at all of them,
you look at all of them without the assumptions that people typically use. If you apply some sharp math, you can find changes.
That's really interesting because like a really great experienced pilot might have like intuition, like something slightly off here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is trying to have machines help him do. It's essentially AIing some of the things that you've relied on pilots' guts to do for a long time.
Got it. So if everything changes, but nothing's an alarm, you still know something's off, and you should be able to detect that.
That's the point. That's it. Yep.
That's cool. Let's go to 21st century STEM here. You're now the dean of UATX's Center for STEM. Before we get into UATX specifically, let's talk about designing a STEM curriculum for the 21st century. Why does it require a new approach to do STEM now? Aren't there lots of things that are the same as they've always been? What's missing in universities today? Yeah,
it's a really good question. And there's some great things going on in universities now, but there are some things that we want to reclaim. Our provost often talks about the Roman god Janus, who has a face pointing backwards and he has a face pointing forward. And so we want to develop students who think about STEM built upon a study of kind of the great human questions. Like the reason that you study STEM at all is because you have some aughts that you'd like to approach or some great human questions. So that's a foundation that some STEM programs will just omit and they'll kind of race straight to the STEM.
So it's like vocational versus actually like the philosophy.
Yeah, that'd be one way to think about it. We'd like these folks to have some philosophical underpinnings for sure. But the other thing that I think is the big problem is that particularly in STEM, things are advancing so quickly, and certainly in some research areas like PhD programs at the greatest schools, they may be on the cutting edge, but undergraduate curriculum is just stodgy. The lesson plans that my colleagues were teaching at the Naval Academy in 2020 were the same ones that I received in 1987. And some stuff doesn't change, but there are a lot of things that ought to be refreshed. And so we're going to do what you would do if you're starting over, refreshing so that you can meet today's challenges.
Because I imagine you still want to learn a lot of the same math and physics and other things that you taught 30,
Yes.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
But you want to teach them in different ways based on what's possible now, or you want to teach certain parts of them that are more useful, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are some things that a scientifically minded person should just know. Things like Newton's second law, the second law of thermodynamics. In fact, there are some folks who skip all of the basics will try and come up with these innovative ideas where effectively what they're trying to do is make cold things go to hot or balls roll uphill. I mean, not that literally, but they've missed the foundation.
Yeah, they've missed what's possible.
Reality is always going to win. and so identifying the things that are crucial for scientific understanding are things that we're going to do. And that's going to be baked into the core of every STEM student's education. And then the trick is to figure out when you wean from that into the cutting edge stuff where they're racing to the front and looking at today's really challenging
Because you want to
problems.
jump back and forth between the basics and the really exciting things to the front. Because I imagine sometimes those things get students really engaged, but then they have to keep bringing back to the basics.
Yeah, I think one good pedagogical model is when, as you're teaching these foundations, you're looking forward to really exciting applications. And then as you're starting to focus on the applications, you keep reaching back and finding these transferable concepts. Here's an idea we talked about way back whenever. Here's how that's actually showing up.
I always felt I would have appreciated differential equations more if I was like in partial differential equations, if I was exposed to like exact uses while I was learning them, because it's really hard in abstract sometimes.
I'm so glad you brought up diffuse. I taught a diffuse class once, and I had a physics student in this class, and I remember we were talking about an idea of resonance, which is important in all sorts of physical applications. And I was given this, before we went through unleashing the math, we did this kind of discussion about ideas about resonance, and he put his hand in the air and he said, he didn't call me professor, it was Captain Ruth, this doesn't sound like math, it sounds like ideas. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad you said that, but it's depressing at the same time. That students would think that math isn't ideas is a sad feature of the current system. And so ideas and math go together. We're going to make that happen here.
I love it. Well, I could use some refreshing on some of these things.
Sit
too,
in
so
anytime.
I'm looking forward to
We
it.
won't even make you pay.
Oh yes, you will. And in recent years, we've seen obviously identity politics, wokeness seep even into the sciences. That's something that a lot of us thought wouldn't happen. How do you guard against that, and how do you cultivate authentic curiosity and openness among students without going into those areas?
Yeah, it is surprising to me. I'm surprised. I was looking at a paper recently in what would be considered a quality journal in an area of biology, and at the end of the article, they had these identity statements where the authors listed these features about themselves, which, quite frankly, are completely irrelevant to the study. And there are these Mertonian norms in science. It goes all the way back to the 40s, and one of them is called universalism, which I will paraphrase as scientific validity gives not a rip about your personal preferences. And that 60 years ago, nobody would have argued with that. Today, that's coming under fire. So here's how you get at that. One is that you repeat that mantra over and over again. You model that in the work that you do. You model it in the teaching. And then you just keep telling students, reality is going to win. Reality wins. And as you continue to demonstrate reality winning in STEM, I think students will start to believe it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Well, hopefully we're able to keep the nonsense out of things and focus on what matters.
As long as I'm here, we won't have any nonsense.
So let's dive more into STEM at UATX. First, what does it look like to build a STEM program from the ground up? Where do you start?
That's the most daunting thing about my assignment here so far, is to build from the ground up. So the first place you start is you surround yourself by great people. I have advisors across the spectrum of math and sciences who have helped me think about what does great STEM look like today. So great advisors is the first step. The second is just taking advantage of the fact that when you're starting over, you don't have to hold on to stuff that is long overdue to be expired. And so thinking innovatively, thinking about how to take advantage of new starts has been a big part of developing the curriculum. And then one thing that we're going to do that not everybody's doing is I have some colleagues that use the phrase, let's teach STEM assuming that computers exist. That kind of sounds silly. And I don't just mean computer programming. What I mean is that so humans are amazing beings. They have innate dignity, and I think humans are really special. But as computers, they're third rate. And so STEM should spend less time having folks do the tedium of computation and more time on modeling problems, interpreting solutions, validating sensitivity analysis. So we're going to redistribute where the focus is so that students are employing computers where they ought to be doing the work and doing more of the hard human thing.
Yeah, know how to do computation, but don't spend a ton of time.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Our first concentration is actually computing and data science. Can you give us a course overview on what knowledge and skills students are expected to learn from computing and data science?
Yeah, so like all STEM students, the computing and data science students will get a rigorous core that involves quantifying uncertainty. They'll have physics, they'll have programming, this kind of core that every STEM person I think ought to know. But in this particular concentration area, it's a bit of a blend of what we essentially looked at what are the best computing science programs doing out there and what are some great analytics programs doing out there, and how can we combine those sort of the best ofs in a way that is going to enable students to do great projects. So it's going to involve a lot of programming. It'll have data structures and algorithms and these things that you are probably familiar with some cutting edge analytics techniques and things like that, and then a ton of elective space for them to really do things like projects and kind of player support and things like that.
So around the University of Austin, we have a lot of people who've built big innovative companies. A lot of our friends are eager to be helpful, who are kind of the founders who can know what skills are necessary. How are you integrating that into things like the computing data science area?
Yeah, so one is just asking them and taking some of our curriculum is directly an output of talking to folks in Austin that are saying these are the things that are really important for kids to know. So that's an important bit. And then a thing that we may get to talk to a little later is actually making connections with those people to have our students engage with those companies. I'm actually really excited about the degree to which I think our students are going to be embedded in Austin and doing some kind of learning and doing together.
There's some pretty cool companies here.
Amazing, yeah.
The Boring Company and SpaceX are here, obviously, and
yep.
I think our friend who's the CEO of Boring Company wants to help us with mechanical engineering, which is exciting.
That's exactly right. Yeah, in fact, I'm meeting. So he and I were corresponding this week. In fact, and his lead talent guy and I are meeting next week out at Boring. We're going to start talking about what this is going to look like. By the time students are ready to engage in that, we're going to have the lights are going to be on, the gears are all going to be turning, and I wish I were a student at this time.
Definitely. Well, I bought some land nearby there to build a little place for university as
Awesome.
well, so we can
I love it.
have a big place we can go to practice building things with
This is the way to do it.
And obviously we have other companies in town in the defense world and the computer science world, and I guess the idea is expose them to the hardest problems going on there, and hopefully some of that could tie back into what they're learning in the advanced coursework.
Yeah, and if I can add just a little bit of that, it's one thing to expose students to ideas, and there are a lot of companies that say, oh, that's an internship, you just have them come in, and it's more than that. So these companies are going to actually get to feed back to the curriculum. When I talk to CEOs of other companies, one of their complaints is that they don't think what the students are learning or what these CEOs value. Imagine if you had a university that had the agility to listen to industry, listen to the doers, and start to shape the curriculum with that. I think companies are excited to be involved in shaping what these students are learning, and then embedding these students not just for a summer, but for a full 2-year period. Obviously they won't be over there every day for 2 years, but sort of a steady strain where they're seeing the problems, we're feeding the problems back into our curriculum, and these kids are going to be ready to do good work right when they walk out the door.
It's a very interesting dialectic because historically you either had schools that were more philosophically minded about basically the intellectual foundations which we have and those sorts of things and what it means to be a citizen in a republic and all of this highfalutin stuff, which is important, or you had like technical vocational schools iterating, and I think so some of these other schools, like what you'd think like Harvard and Yale and et cetera, they'd be like, well, we're too highbrow to care what business thinks, and besides, if you go back 200, 300 years, business wasn't really that sophisticated. It was kind of seen as like the Cretans, basically. And I think that's what it was like. It's like a very arrogant attitude against it. Whereas now, fast forward to today, you still want to teach people to be a citizen. That's actually not even being done in these schools anymore. To teach them to be courageous and have those values and principles and intellectual foundations. But you also, I think, for the smartest people in the world in the STEM, my impression is a lot of those are in the companies now. So you have to work with the companies if you want to do well.
And it is really to think of the ivory. So ivory tower used to be kind of this not pejorative. It was this notion that scholars would retreat and they'd think big thoughts without sort of the noise of the background. And now it's a totally pejorative term. It gives a sense of disconnectedness and no awareness of what's going on out in the real world. So we're looking at kind of a wean where that they go from this very deep philosophical intellectual foundations underpinning, and while they're still with us, we deliver them out to doing great
Interesting.
things.
So the first 2 years are a little more ivory tower with starting to learn some of this, the STEM and everything else. Then you go into the really hardcore real world
Yeah,
stuff.
and if I can be clear, we haven't done a great job marketing it. Even though the first 2 years focuses on intellectual foundations, students are going to be able to right out of the gate start taking their STEM courses. So the IF is the dominant thing in their first term, and it weans down over the first 2 years, and then their focus area starts to grow. So they aren't going to have to wait. Is what I'm getting at.
You recently wrote a blog about 3 features of STEM at UATX, starting with a curriculum grounded in wisdom and motivated by practical application. Let's touch on the project courses. I think it's really important for talented students to learn together. Like one of the best things at Stanford that I really enjoyed was CS 248 was one of the courses. We had to make a 3D video game, which was pretty cool 20 years ago to have to learn how to do. Like, are there going to be similar types of challenges for electives, and how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think about that a lot. Can I ask you, why did you like that course? What made that so valuable to you?
Well, I was obsessed with video games at that age, and so that was very fun to get to learn how to actually build some of these things myself. And it was really fun to get to work with a bunch of other students and just figure out how to manage like a project course together and to learn what I was good at, what I was bad at, how that it's a very different motion to work in a group trying to get something done with a timeline, you know?
Yeah, well, those features really are why you would do project courses. One is relevance, right? It was a thing that you cared a ton about. And the other is that it gives you it enables you practically to do the type of work you're going to do in the real world. So I think just like that weaning model I described before, as the students progress further in their curricular program, they're going to have more and more options like that. So I'm wide open to having a video gaming course, but
the students are so lucky nowadays because it's so much easier too. We've built all these libraries. You know, getting the Java engines to talk to each other in real time for a multiplayer game back then was impossible. I haven't actually, unfortunately, been able to go back and do it, but I'm 100% convinced it must be pretty easy now.
You can sit down on that course too. So we're gonna do these things because this relevance and teamwork, they're important things to do in classes. So we don't want students to go to the real world and think they've gone to another planet. Right? They should step out of UATX and feel like they're ready to work on day one and ready to exercise big ideas and be leaders and good people of virtue.
One of the things you said is the courses will emphasize computation-enabled thinking. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we're working with some world-class partners, and we're gonna field some curricular programs that are different than what anybody else is doing. This gets back to something I spoke about a little before. If you think about a quantitative problem, any sort, any field, generally I'll break it down into 3 phases. One is you actually have to take what the problem is and you have to abstract it in some way so that you can formulate it in mathematical language. Right? You can't attack a problem until you've done the formulation, but you need, generally humans that's one place you'd like humans to sort of emphasize. Then there's this middle bit. Most technical classes now, they prepackage the problem for you and they say, here's an equation, solve for X, or and you spend all of this time being a third-rate computer.
Exactly. You should probably be formulating things more than
spend way more time formulating. But then there's another thing. So I'll use an example that I'm sort of embarrassed that is a real-life story. Is that you'll give a student a question and you say, well, trust me, this is related to something that matters, but solve for the probability that umpty scratch happens. And then the student says -17 and then moves on. And that should be terrifying, right? Because what that says is that the student was never thinking about validating this, like how does this answer inform the question? How is it? Yeah. And so what we'd like to do is have students spend way more time abstracting and modeling and way more time interpreting and validating, and then let the first-rate computer, these things that we all own today, spend more time on the middle. We're going to have students that are more capable. It does not mean that we're not going to teach them any computational skills. There's a lot of beauty actually to be seen under the hood, but they should spend all their time tinkering under the hood. Put the machine to work on that stuff.
No, that makes sense. One of the challenges for me, at Stanford, I was really good at the algorithms courses. I got A+, but when it actually came to like setting up a coding environment and like learning how to build things, there was always some kid I'd have to ask to do it for me because this is hard. And you never got learned it in your class. Like some kid around me, both in high school and college, would know. I remember we asked a bunch of our friends who run engineering teams, like what skills do they wish people would know coming out of school. What have you found? Because it seems like a lot of these things are not being taught that are actually practical skills.
Yeah, I think there are a few things. One is teamwork. Like the fact that you would ask your friend to do it for you. Your professor probably hated that, but that actually is a big part of working as a team. Recognizing my expertise is ended. How do I reach out to somebody that can help me? So that's actually, I would call that a skill rather than as a kind of a crutch. And then to relevance, having students working on problems that are clearly relevant when they're working on it. I think that employers are saying these students don't know how to do very well what they were taught, and nothing they were taught is that relevant to what I want them to do. So this gets back to that industry feedback loop. We're going to have our curriculum informed with the problems that industry knows are important, so our students start sharpening their teeth on those problems while they're learning how to solve problems.
And how do you think about guest lecturers, guest teachers? So it sounds like, of course, hopefully our friend Steve Davis at Boring Company wants to teach mechanical engineering. I have friends who want to come help teach certain computer science classes. What's the right way to integrate that? Because you obviously want the academics to be in charge, I'd imagine, but how do you bring in these people to teach?
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about this. My current thinking, and I'm open to suggestion from any of your listeners and anybody else, is to be really deliberate about building a portfolio that has really, I'd say, sort of three main sectors. One is what I would call the workhorse faculty. That's going to be me and the team that I just hired, and we're going to be the core that doesn't go away, and we keep the machine running. And then there's going to be a middle core of, I've already got folks that are clamoring to come teach as visiting professors. So experts, PhDs in their field who are going to come, and they don't necessarily want to leave their school yet, although they may, but they're going to come and they're going to give us really sharp teaching in areas where they're as good as anybody at it. And so we're going to fold those folks in. And then you'll get the Steve Davis type, somebody who is brilliantly aware of what the practical applications are and weaving in, I think universities often will call these professors of practice, but folks who are expert doers. And so the balance of that portfolio is the thing I have to think through is what's the allocation. But I think those three things together are going to be really powerful.
So another thing I want to ask you about, I've noticed a lot of the most talented friends in engineering have a lot of fun with it, especially in school. And there's all sorts of ways you can do competitions, or probably hopefully not too many horrible pranks, but there's all sorts of things we could do with these things. And how do you inculcate a culture of fun where people are enjoying themselves? Like, should we be hosting more contests for high schools? Maybe or are there things like this we should be bringing into it?
Yeah, I mean, it should be fun. Let me tell you, one way you make it fun is you model that. So I don't know if it's coming out in the interview, but I could do math all day long. Not because, well, maybe I'm a nerd, but I just think it's powerful, it's beautiful, and it's worth being good at. And so we're bringing in faculty who are going to make classes more fun than maybe your faculty members.
You want people who love what
people who love what they're doing. So that's one way. Another is so I love the idea of hosting contests, but you can make a ton of learning contests. I'm going to give you two examples in my teaching experience that were probably my most effective classes. One, I'm embarrassed to admit, I was teaching a statistical topic. It's called Mallows CP is the idea. The statisticians in the audience will know exactly what that is, but it's a way to figure out whether a model is any good. And I had a million things going on, and I hadn't tuned the lesson to the degree that I was satisfied with. And so I just walked into class and I said, hey, students, here's Mallows CP. It's like a scorecard. This is how good your model is. Whoever gets the best Mallows CP, you spend the rest of class getting the best CP score, and you don't have to do tonight's homework. Best lesson ever. Those students, they were comparing answers. They were trying things out. It was not this boring old lecture. It was a
contest.
It's a contest. And of course, I was teaching midshipmen who are super sort of smart and competitive anyway, but it was like being on a varsity athletic field. They were grinding and sweating, and there was probably more learning in that 50 minutes than any other time I've had in class. And then one other example, when I was a submarine officer, we spent a lot of time trying to train on these very technical systems that are involved in operating the reactor. One of them is called the protection and analysis system. It's how the reactor protects itself from either humans doing stupid things or the environment doing harmful things to it. And one way you can teach that system is to have a trainee just sort of memorize all this stuff. Another way to teach it is you challenge them to beat it. So see if you can.
Not an actual real life.
No. So not have them do it, but give them the challenge. How would you beat that system? If our goal were to do
how would you blow up the nuclear?
To be very clear to all of your audience, nobody out there is trying to blow up our reactors. But boy, you challenge a young, sharp
Think
kid,
about how it might happen.
How would you break it?
Yeah.
Because what they have to do is they actually have to know the system. It's just like in warfighting. The way you beat your enemy is you understand how he operates.
100%.
So,
well, the way you do cyber defense is you play a game to try to break in.
it's a game. And so the break-in game, I had more learning happen about how P&A worked than ever just droning through, oh, here's this interlock, here's the system, whatever. Challenge them to beat it, and they'll learn.
I love it. Well, I think it's all about games and contests. And
Games,
competition.
contests, challenge people. And
yeah.
when you put a challenge in front of kids, they rise to the challenge. I'm really hopeful.
UATX right now is currently accepting its inaugural class of 100 students. I think we're just crossing more than half of the class is already totally locked in, and the applications are still open for some people. Some people are still deciding. If there are students or parents watching this who might be interested in STEM at UATX, why should they choose UATX? What's your pitch?
Yeah, so my pitch is your students are going to get some of the best teachers in the country who are going to care about your students, and they're going to be present. You can send your kid to whatever you think the top tier school is. They're going to see their instructor of record almost never. They're going to have a TA that they may or may not understand, and they're going to be depressed. They're going to come to UATX, and they're going to be engaged with professors who care about them as people and care about developing them as students and as learners. And then we're going to have great curriculum that's going to be world-class because it's informed by the hardest problems that are out there today.
I love that. And I'll add to that anyone who's interested in STEM coming to UATX, who wants to be an entrepreneur, who wants to be involved in the innovation world, I think the people around UATX are unmatched in terms of how involved innovators are and how involved they're not just in helping the students with jobs, but hopefully in shaping the innovation material as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We just did Admitted Students Weekend earlier. It was a second group of students coming for Admit Weekend. We're seeing some really amazing talent. What's your impression of this quality of kids coming here?
Yeah, I love these kids. These kids are, they're sitting at the edge of their seat. They want to learn. They have a humility that I really appreciate. They recognize they have things to learn, but they think they know a lot. And they are gelling together in ways that I have never seen students even gel at the end of a full school year. These kids all recognize they're coming to do a great thing. They get to be the part of the first class at the University of Austin, and there's just an energy that I can barely describe. So I'm super excited to teach them.
And I'm really excited by this because we have kids with the very top scores, but also there's a natural selection of who wants to be a founding student in a new institution. You're getting people who are bold. You're getting people who are confident. You're getting people who are obviously the type of people who are going to be entrepreneurs. I mean, a lot of kids will join the entrepreneur club and then go to MBA school and then work in the corporate ladder, and they're not really entrepreneurs. They want to pretend to join the club. Actually choosing to go to found a school, like that's an entrepreneurial choice.
Yeah, here's the thing about these kids. They are foregoing a credential that they could easily achieve by accepting an offer to one of these other schools, and they're going to be doers. That's going to be what our students are. They're going to be the class of doers, and I couldn't ask for better.
Well, those are the people who are going to be defining the 21st century.
That's exactly right, yep.
So what's your vision for UATX in the coming years? Like, where is it going to be 10 or 20 years from now? What's it have now versus in the future?
Yeah, so we're going to, every year or two, we're going to add a new program so that by the time we get to, say, the 10-year point or so, we're going to have a full suite of engineering opportunities. And as we continue to grow, we're going to build relationships with, let's say we've got 5 relationships with companies today before we even have students. That's going to be relationships with dozens of companies in Austin, throughout the United States, and perhaps throughout the world that are looking at UATX students saying, those are kids that are going to work on my problems today so they can come and make me a great company tomorrow.
I love it. And, I personally have already worked with a few dozen people in my life who've gone on to build unicorns. And just one of the goals for me here is to bring in really top talent, partner with these kids, and have huge numbers of great companies started by our entrepreneurs UATX.
It'd be awesome.
In 10 years, that's going to be a huge advantage for them as well, to be in that network.
It'd be my great privilege if I can go work for one of my students someday. That'd be fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great note to end on. There's still opportunities for the best and brightest students to get in here. Where should kids go to learn more?
Yeah, so if you're interested in coming to the next great university, you should go to uaustin.org and you should find the apply button. I look forward to reading your application.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks a lot, Joe.